What's up with Joshua Bassett?
His promise is peace, and my testimony is my healing. Remember, forgive quickly, love freely, and walk courageously. Love always wins in the end. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
My name is Elizabeth. I grew up in Christian fundamentalism, and I think it's absolutely fascinating to see a mainstream celebrity embrace a very fundamentalist version of Christianity who has also been open about his sexuality, his relationship with trauma in the church, and who has made national headlines. I also have raging ADHD, and I can't seem to film without doing something in my hands. We're gonna do my makeup while I chat about Joshua Bassett, mainly because I haven't done my makeup yet today, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Joshua Bassett started his journey to mainstream stardom with his hit role in Disney's High School the Musical, the TV series, the musical. I can't even say that. I tried to watch one episode, and that show was not aimed at me. Partly because I'd never watched High School Musical, and I think you have to watch High School Musical to appreciate the TV series, the High School Musical, the TV series. I can't even say it. High School Musical, the series. Anyway, so Joshua Bassett was one of the main characters in that show, and he starred alongside Olivia Rodrigo. They were both very young, in late teens when they starred in this TV series. It was one of Disney Plus's first shows on the network when Disney Plus premiered. Eventually, Josh and Olivia Rodrigo had a thing going on with each other. And then if you are aware of Joshua Bassett, he gained mainstream prominence when Olivia released her hit album, Sour, in which her relationship with Joshua Bassett and their breakup was kind of the subject of controversy. Now, her album was rumored to be about Joshua Bassett, and I think that's rumors, but basically everyone took it and ran with it, and Joshua Bassett was flooded with a lot of feedback from Olivia Rodrigo's fans, especially about his relationship with Sabrina Carpenter, who he seemed to date after he broke up with Olivia Rodrigo. Now, keep in mind, these are teenagers. Teenagers can date people and break up with them, and doesn't make them evil, doesn't make them bad. It just makes them regular human beings who are learning to navigate relationships in your first very young dating relationships. I don't blame Olivia for writing a hit album based on her very young teenage relationship. I do blame mainstream media that perpetuated the kind of dialogue about young people and their very first relationship in a very unhealthy manner, and the fans who seem to have it out for Joshua Bassett for breaking Olivia's heart when it was just a relationship between the two of them and one person's side of the story. That is how Joshua Bassett gained mainstream prominence. That's how I became aware of him. I'd seen the first episode of High School the Musical, the series, I didn't really care about any of the actors. They were kids. They were not people I was following. And then Olivia Rodrigo's hit album came out, and I was aware of Joshua Bassett's relationship. Probably too aware of who a 18-year-old boy is dating, and I will leave it at that. Anyway, but Joshua Bassett had a full life. He was 17 or 18 when he became nationally known. So who was he before High School Musical, the series, and Sour hit the market, and he became a mainstream household name, especially for teenage girls. Anyway, Joshua Bassett was born in California. He was born December 22nd, which I believe makes him a Capricorn. He's very young. He's only 22 years old. His parents are Taylor and Laura Bassett, and he has 5 younger sisters, and he was homeschooled. It's actually hard to find a lot of confirmed information about Joshua Bassett's parents on the internet. There's a lot of rumors on Reddit, and I did some deep research. I found a book that his dad wrote that kind of is scary. His dad wrote a book basically blasting secular culture and embracing some far-right Christian rhetoric that can be kind of dangerous. So I can't imagine what it was like to grow up under that. I also have some inside information, and I don't know if you've ever seen these papers. I'm going to show it to you, but I have a friend who was in theater with Joshua Bassett when he was a sophomore in high school. So he was in a Christian theater group, and this is him in the play Godspell, and he is in part of the cast as well as one of his sisters, and as you can see, he's a young guy. And my friend said that he was from an extremely Christian background, that everyone knew that his parents were very, very Christian when they were in theater together. And every day at this kind of theater, they had sermons and prayers and like all sorts of Christian vernacular that kind of ran the theater group. Now, I also did a little bit of research on what Joshua Bassett has said about his own childhood. So what has Joshua Bassett said has happened in his childhood? Well, number one, he said he was sexually abused while he was a child in his Christian theater group. I wasn't sure if it actually happened where he performed Godspell or if it was within his own church, but he has been performing since he was 7 years old in musical theater. It seems like something he's always loved. Publicly stated that he was abused by a member of that theater group, by leadership in that group. He also stated that once he got his first starring role at Disney and he was trying to make it in LA, that he was living out of his car and he was homeless. Now keep in mind, he was 17 or 18 when he was starring in High School Musical, the series. So it's really interesting to me that a 17 or 18-year-old child is homeless when he is on a Disney network. And I think if you consider the fact that his parents are extremely Christian and they had allowed him to participate in Christian theater, they probably did not expect that he would land a role with Disney. And the fact that he was homeless gives you an idea of the lack of support he had in his life for his dreams, which was to be in the show apparently, and something he wanted to do. And even if you're living too far away in Southern California to drive to work every day at Disney, allowing your child to be living out of their car instead of helping them find an apartment and helping pay for alternative housing speaks a lot to the kind of character that his parents, his supposedly very Christian parents, have given him. So let's talk about the timeline. So High School the Musical, the series, is on Disney Plus, and Olivia Rodrigo releases Driver's License, I believe, in December of 2020. I'm pretty sure it was December 2020 because it was shortly after my breakup, which was October 2020. And I remember when that song came out, and I quickly learned it was about Joshua Bassett, but I really didn't. I remember reading about him, and I remember seeing lots of TikToks about the situation, but I really wasn't paying attention to Joshua. Now, the full album Sour came out in May of 2021. Joshua Bassett came out as queer. He shared that he would be interested in dating like Harry Styles, which wouldn't everybody be interested in? Anyway, it was a very subtle coming out of the closet, like, yeah, I think I'm bisexual basically kind of comment. He came out in May of 2021, which is around the same time that the full Sour album came out. Now, Joshua was bombarded with a lot of hatred even as he came out of the closet. I remember seeing TikToks where people said that he came out just to distract from the fact that he had broken up with Olivia Rodrigo. Why are you making his coming out about another girl? Like, this kid could not get a break. So the album came out in 2021. He was born in 2000, so he's 20 years old. And I can not imagine my very first dating relationship that was serious being the subject of a platinum winning album that everybody in the world seems to be talking about. And then when you try to come out and people are asking questions about your ex in that relationship, and you casually come out in the middle of that media PR, it's summertime, you feel like you can do anything. I'm just imagining myself at 20 years old, how I would be feeling. To deal with all of that and then have everyone hating on you online and calling your coming out experience a distraction from the fact that you broke up with your ex-girlfriend, who, by the way, you were 17, 18, 19 years old when you were dating. Who doesn't break up with the person they dated at 19 years old? It's just they happened to write an award-winning album about you. Now, Joshua's health at this time was also at risk. So Driver's License is released in December. It is very quickly become known that it is about him. And in January 2021, he is hospitalized for severe stress. I forget what exactly. Oh, he was hospitalized with septic shock and told that he was 10 hours away from dying. That's traumatizing. Like, there's a whole album about you. You're hospitalized. You may have been dealing with anxiety and the stress of having the entire world talking about your high school relationship, and then you go into septic shock for other health issues that are unrelated exactly to, because stress doesn't cause septic shock, but it can also, but stress can cause other health conditions that cause you to ignore issues that lead to septic shock. I see people all the time saying, well, he didn't really go into septic shock because of driver's license, like blaming driver's license is dumb. And I'm thinking, do you not know how the human body works? Do you not know how stressful it is to have everybody in the world talking about you, and that kind of stress can lead to other health conditions that could lead to something like septic shock and heart failure? And can you imagine a doctor looking you in the face and saying, you are 10 hours away from death at 20 years old? No, I can't imagine that. And because I can't imagine that, I want to extend a lot of grace to anyone who has dealt with that. And for me, that grace should be extended to somebody like Joshua Bassett for having to deal with that. I just think, yes, it's like nothing against Olivia Rodrigo for releasing the album. She's a talented writer, talented singer. Her album is a very fun banger. I definitely listened to it as I coped with my breakup. But the way we react to albums and people's personal lives is kind of toxic. Nothing against, I don't think anyone sharing about their personal life is toxic. I think the way our culture reacts to people sharing about their personal lives is very toxic, and that is my opinion on that. Joshua dealt with a lot in 2021. Sour's release, he's hospitalized, he comes out, and then he also discloses in December of 2021 that he dealt with childhood sexual assault abuse. And that is talking about CSA publicly, as someone who has also survived CSA, it is horribly hard to do. It is very difficult to talk about something that impacted you as a kid, that was a secret, that very few people believe when you disclose it, and it impacts your relationship with your family and your friends and your loved ones, and to have it very publicly known by the entire world in the news media. I really can't fathom that, because that is not something I have ever had to deal with, and I can imagine that becomes very isolating. As a 20-year-old who's isolated from his family, because remember, his family is conservative, and he was literally homeless when he started out in Hollywood, and he has to deal with the onslaught of Olivia Rodrigo fans. He's hospitalized. He doesn't seem to have the support of many friends or family. Dealing with all of that at 21 years old, going into 2022, what does that look like for Joshua Bassett? Well, it looks like a young man who's really looking for support, for community, to feel affirmed, to feel loved, and to find people who care about him for who he is, and not because of who he's dated or what kind of music he's making or what kind of popularity he has on the internet, because that seems to have been what his life has now turned into. I think a lot of us weren't really paying attention to Joshua Bassett if you weren't a fan of his and actively like looking forward to his new music or his tour, which is coming up. And then he started posting some really interesting messages on Twitter and Instagram that caught my attention, because anytime someone posts something so very blatantly evangelical, as well as the opposite of messaging that they have shared in the past, it catches my eye. And what he shared was concerning to me. Joshua has been very open about his mental health struggles his mental health struggles having grown up in a evangelical family and super religious background. So it was really jarring to see him post things that were very shame-based and seemed to condemn himself and focus on his wrongdoing instead of like being human, and seemed to knock himself down a lot. I'm going to read his Instagram post. He posted this on Instagram on his Instagram stories. After posting on Twitter, "Jesus Christ is the only way. His death and resurrection are historically documented. Turn away from hate, seek forgiveness, and come home to him." Very Christian statement. Then he posted a whole confessional seeming post called "Speaking Out, Owning Up." Part of speaking out is owning up. It's important to acknowledge and reflect on the ways that I've hurt people, some I may never speak to again. To those who will have me, I'm eager to ask forgiveness. The tongue is a sword, for better or for worse, and our actions leave a stain. If I were to present a list of the ways I've let others and myself down, I would run for the hills. As I grow, I can't neglect where I've been. I've been selfish, ignorant, harmful, reckless, stupid, scared, desperate, and desensitized, careless, inconsiderate, intolerable, and ugly, mean, passive, impatient, and stubborn. The list goes on. While I do my best every day to be as good as I can be, I won't deny the many shortcomings. This is actually 2 whole story posts, and when I read this, my heart breaks. Because this is a young man who's saying, I'm sorry for letting people down. You never have to apologize for letting people down, because letting people down is human, and also isn't about you, it's about them. If they are feeling let down, that's on them, not on you. And he's also calling being ignorant, stupid, ugly, scared a shortcoming. This is such a shame-filled post, and shaming being human, that it honestly hurts to see anyone, especially someone who has gone through CSA as a child, who has gone through public backlash, who's been homeless because his parents didn't support him, someone who was raised in an anti-LGBTQ household, who was brave and came out of the closet, and now is apparently surrounded by shame, because that is the only message I can receive from this Instagram story post, is Joshua Bassett has been surrounded by people who are shaming him for who he is. And yet all of us make mistakes, but that doesn't mean we have to be publicly shamed for it, and he has been through the ringer post Olivia Rodrigo relationship, so that just brings that entire situation, and this kind of post breaks my heart. I think a lot of us recognize that he seemed to have gone back to Christianity, but was it the Christianity of his parents? Was it better? Was it worse? A lot of people didn't know until he showed up at Bethel, where he was then baptized. Now, Bethel is notorious for being a scam, and for trying to raise a dead baby from the dead, for saying that they could change people's sexual orientation, and the changed movement, and the like conversion therapy. Joshua Bassett is at their church on a Sunday, very public video, announces he believes in Jesus, and is baptized. He then makes a statement that he doesn't support Bethel and everything, but this is the church he has clearly been going to, because this is the church where he is baptized. And he then holds a pop-up worship service where thousands of people attend, or hundreds, I should say, not thousands. To get those resources to hold a pop-up, he is leaning on Bethel resources, because Bethel is very well connected. And nothing against anyone attending church, but this church is a toxic kind of church, whether it's through healing ministry, claiming they could raise a baby from the dead, whether it's a person who is LGBTQ and who is struggling to reconcile their sexuality and their faith, and therefore Bethel preys on them by saying, hey, we can take that away, we can make you ex-gay. That is the kind of church that seems to have pulled Joshua Bassett in and seems to have surrounded him. Reciting all of this history, sharing about this 21-year-old kid's life. I call him a kid because I feel so old that I'm almost 30 and he's a kid. He does feel very much like a kid because he is definitely still finding his way in life. But after sharing all of that, I feel like it condemns us as a culture. That someone who was very publicly dragged through the ringer and very publicly lost his friend circle, very publicly was hurting, the only people who seemed to be able to connect with him and to provide him support in a hard time is a church who notoriously preys on people who are hurting.
I don't want to excuse Joshua Bassett's association with Bethel and the danger of Bethel Church's ideology. This is a young man who has been extremely open about his life, his near-death experiences, his struggles with body image. Rarely are men so open about this kind of struggle. It is a vulnerability that our culture does not understand how to process or give proper support to. Bethel, with its extreme emotional clutches and sense of community, is the kind of place a hurting person can turn to for support, even if that support extends harm and deepens scars. For a young man who has been raised in teaching that his sexuality is wrong, that he deserves shame, Bethel is comfortable.
And I think the fact that people on the internet are so up in arms over Josh and saying, oh, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel natural, this hurts me that he's suddenly at Bethel, and I get it, but I also think there's a disconnect in what church does to people and the kind of lifelong toxic theology that rests in your brain like a virus that's waiting to latch onto your pain and trauma and drive you back into toxic theology. Because if you've been taught your whole life that you're broken and in need of help, when you feel the most broken, if you don't have a good support system, if you don't understand the fact that the church will only harm you more, if you're young and vulnerable and in need of help, the church is easier than being by yourself. Anyway, that is where I see Joshua Bassett right now. I see him as a very hurt young person who has tried to forge their own path, who has dealt with being homeless as a result, who has dealt with being publicly shamed as a result, and who really is tired of fighting. And Bethel is easier than being solo, than being ostracized by your family, than being cut off from a support system. Because if anything, we can acknowledge at least that he was cut off very harshly from a support system with all of the ruckus of 2021 and the drama between him and Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter. With the toxic clout chasing culture of LA, they can turn to a church because a church isn't about chasing clout. At least outwardly, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like a solution to the constant grind of being popular. And I'm not saying it is. It's definitely not. It's a very temporary solution that often will only perpetuate harm that is done to you. Honestly, it's really sad. I think it's really sad that we are seeing the problems in Hollywood magnified, blown up, and really laid open for all of us to see in Joshua Bassett's life. Anyway, that's my little opinion. Hope you enjoyed this video. Enjoyed is a weird word because this was a really hard topic, but hope you appreciated this video. It took me a while to film it because I'm very passionate and I wanted to speak well and not make any like weird mistakes. I wanted to be very open that I condemn Bethel as an organization, but I understand why a young hurting person would end up in that kind of environment and publicly standing on Bethel's stage to be baptized. And honestly, this story kept evolving because I thought about it in January, then he showed up at Bethel, and then he had a worship pop-up. And I was like, well, I'm glad I waited till after the pop-up event because I feel like that magnified what was going on. So we could all very blatantly see this is a guy looking for religious validation because he's lost literally every other support group in his life. Anyway, that's my personal opinion though. Nothing I said in this is fact. It's all my opinion. Gotta say that to protect me in a court of law, apparently. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I don't often make celebrity focused videos, but I like to talk about religious fundamentalism. I also like to have fun little videos about my life. So if that's up your alley, go ahead and hit subscribe and let me know in the comments, and I will see all of y'all next time. See ya.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.